October 15, 2024. A billionaire tech mogul heard a faint whisper in a rain-soaked alley. "Please, my head hurts." And what he discovered would shatter everything he thought he knew about power, survival, and redemption. When he realized the 8-year-old girl bleeding in his arms had just 48 hours before dangerous men would find her, he faced an impossible choice. Risk his empire and his life to save her, or walk away and live with the guilt forever. But could a man who'd never failed at anything survive a world where money meant nothing and a child's courage was the only currency that mattered? The rain hammered against Marcus Caldwell's windshield like bullets, blurring the Chicago skyline into streaks of gold and shadow. His phone buzzed for the 18th time in 10 minutes. Board members, investors, his assistant, all demanding his attention for tomorrow's merger announcement. $12 billion hung in the balance. His entire legacy was reduced to signatures and handshakes. He ignored them all. Marcus had left the gala early, suffocating under the weight of champagne toasts and hollow congratulations. 42 years old, worth more than some countries, and he felt emptier than the day his wife's heart monitor had flatlined 3 years ago. The penthouse waiting for him held nothing but silence and expensive furniture that had never been sat on. His Mercedes took a wrong turn, or maybe the right one. GPS recalculating. The streets narrowed, buildings pressing closer, graffiti replacing corporate logos. This wasn't his Chicago. This was the Chicago his security team told him to avoid. Then he heard it. Faint, barely audible over the rain. "Please." Marcus slowed, his executive brain dismissing it as imagination. But something made him stop. He rolled down the window, rain immediately soaking his $1,000 suit. "Please, my head hurts." The voice came from an alley choked with dumpsters and broken pallets. Marcus grabbed his phone, finger hovering over 911. He should call the police. That's what reasonable people did. But something in that small, trembling voice bypassed reason entirely. He stepped out into the downpour. The alley smelled of rotting food and motor oil. Water rushed along the cracked pavement, carrying trash toward the storm drains. Marcus's Italian leather shoes squelched as he moved deeper into the shadows, his phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Hello? Where are you?" A whimper, behind a stack of cardboard boxes, collapsed from the rain. Marcus shoved them aside, and his breath caught. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her clothes were soaked through, her hair plastered to her face in tight coils. But it was the blood that made his stomach drop. A gash across her temple, still flowing, mixing with rainwater and streaming down her dark skin. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glazed with pain. "Please," she whispered again, her small hand reaching toward him. "My head. It hurts so much." Marcus dropped to his knees, his $2,000 suit ruined in an instant. His hands shook as he pressed his palm against the wound, feeling the warmth of fresh blood against his skin. "I've got you," he said, his voice cracking. "What's your name? What happened?" Her lips moved, barely forming words. "Zoe. They're coming back." "Who's coming back?" Marcus pulled off his jacket, pressing it against her head. The fabric immediately darkened with blood. "Bad men?" she breathed, her small body trembling violently. "I ran, but I couldn't." "My head." Marcus's mind raced. Hospital, police, ambulance. But Zoe's tiny hand gripped his shirt with surprising strength, her eyes suddenly sharp with terror. "No hospitals," she gasped. "They'll find me there. They always find us there." "Zoe, you're bleeding. You need. They killed my mama." The words came out flat, dead. 2 days ago. I saw them. They know what I saw." Marcus froze. The rain pounded harder, but all he could hear was the rushing of his own blood in his ears. This wasn't a lost child. This was a witness. This was someone running for her life. "Please don't leave me," Zoe whispered, her eyes rolling back. "Everyone always leaves." Her body went limp in his arms. Marcus Caldwell had built empires. He'd negotiated with presidents, outmaneuvered rivals, turned failing companies into billion-dollar success stories. He was a man who controlled everything. But in that moment, holding a dying child in a forgotten alley, He controlled nothing. He scooped her into his arms and ran. Marcus burst through the emergency exit of his downtown office building, Zoe limp in his arms. Security cameras tracked his every move, but he didn't care. The executive floor was empty at midnight, glass and steel reflecting his rain-soaked desperation back at him. He laid her on the leather couch in his corner office, hands fumbling for the first aid kit he'd never once opened. The gash on her temple had soaked through his jacket. Blood pooled on the Italian leather, but all Marcus could focus on was the shallow rise and fall of her chest. "Come on, Zoe. Stay with me." He pressed gauze against the wound, his hands steadier now. Years of crisis management kicked in: assess, stabilize, solve. But this wasn't a failing stock price. This was a child bleeding out in front of him. Her eyes snapped open, wild with panic. She thrashed, tiny fists striking his chest. "No, let me go. You're one of them. Zoe, stop. I'm trying to help." She rolled off the couch, stumbling toward the door despite the blood streaming down her face. Marcus caught her gently but firmly, holding her shoulders. "I'm not going to hurt you. Promise. My name is Marcus. I found you in the alley. Remember?" Her chest heaved, eyes darting around the office. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago, the mahogany desk, the abstract art worth more than most cars. Slowly, recognition flickered across her face. "The Rain Man," she whispered. You picked me up." "That's right." Marcus released her carefully, hands raised. "And I'm going to keep you safe. But I need you to let me stop the bleeding. Okay?" Zoe touched her temple, wincing. Her fingers came away red. For a moment, she looked every bit the terrified 8-year-old she was. Then something hardened in her expression, something that made Marcus's chest ache. "You can't call the police," she said flatly. "They have cops on their payroll. That's how they found my mama at the shelter." Marcus felt ice slide down his spine. "Who are they?" "The West Side crew." Her voice was steady, clinical, like she was reciting facts learned through trauma. "My mama testified against them last year. Drug trafficking, money laundering. The trial got delayed, and they came for her." She swayed, and Marcus guided her back to the couch. As he cleaned the wound with antiseptic, she barely flinched. "2 nights ago, 3 men broke into our apartment. Mama told me to hide in the closet. I heard everything." Her voice cracked. The gunshots, her screaming. Then, nothing. Marcus's hands stilled. "Zoe." "I waited until they left. Then I ran. But one of them saw me in the stairwell. He chased me for 6 blocks before I lost him near the river." She looked up at him, eyes too old for her face. "I've been hiding ever since. Sleeping in alleys behind dumpsters. I was so tired tonight, I didn't hear them coming back. One of them hit me with something. I thought I was dead." The clinical detachment shattered. Tears streaked through the grime on her cheeks. "I don't want to die like Mama. I don't want to die alone." Marcus pulled her close. This small broken child who'd survived horrors he couldn't imagine. "You're not alone anymore. And you're not going to die. I swear it." A sound shattered the moment, the elevator chiming down the hall. Marcus's blood turned to ice. The building was locked after midnight. Only executive keycards granted access to this floor. He hadn't used his. Zoe's eyes went wide with terror. "They tracked you. That's impossible." "Your car," she hissed. "If they were watching the alley, they saw your license plate. Rich guy like you? They'd know exactly where to find you." Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Multiple sets. Heavy boots against marble. Marcus's mind raced. The private elevator required a code. His office had reinforced glass, but it wouldn't hold against determined men. The panic room, but it was 3 floors down in the executive suite. Zoe was already moving. Despite her injury, she darted to his desk, grabbing his letter opener like a weapon. Her eyes scanned the office with the precision of someone who'd learned to map escape routes instinctively. "Fire stairs," she whispered. "Northeast corner. I saw them when we came in." "How did you?" "When you're always running, you learn to look." She grabbed his hand, her small fingers surprisingly strong. We go now, or we don't go at all. The doorknob rattled. Then came the unmistakable sound of a keycard sliding through the reader. Someone inside the building had given them access. Marcus grabbed his phone and ran, following an 8-year-old girl who somehow knew more about survival than he'd learned in 42 years of living. The door crashed open behind them as they hit the stairwell. There. Don't let them reach the street. Marcus's lungs burned as they spiraled downward. Zoe somehow keeping pace despite her wounded head. 7 floors. 6. 5. Behind them. Boots thundered closer, the 3rd floor landing. Zoe suddenly yanked him sideways through an unmarked door. They tumbled into darkness. Where are we? Marcus gasped. Maintenance tunnel. Zoe breathed. Every building has them. Mama taught me. As the footsteps pounded past their hiding spot, Marcus realized something profound. He wasn't saving this child. They were saving each other. The maintenance tunnel smelled of concrete dust and electrical wiring. Emergency lights cast everything in sickly yellow, throwing long shadows across pipes that dripped condensation onto the metal walkway. Marcus's breath came in ragged gasps as they pressed against the wall, listening to the boots' thunder past above them. Zoe's hand remained locked in his, her pulse racing beneath his thumb. When the sounds finally faded, she sagged against the concrete, touching her temple gingerly. The makeshift bandage Marcus had applied was already soaking through. We need to get you to a hospital, Marcus said, his voice echoing softly in the narrow space. No. The word came out sharp, final. I told you they have people everywhere. Hospitals, police stations, even some fire departments. The West Side crew runs half the South Side. They'll know the second I walk through any door. Marcus wanted to argue, to insist that his money and influence could protect her. But the last hour had shredded every assumption he'd built his life on. Wealth meant nothing to men with guns and corrupt badges. Power was useless when the system itself was poisoned. Then where? He asked quietly. We can't stay here forever. Zoe closed her eyes, thinking. Even wounded and exhausted, her mind worked with frightening efficiency. You have friends? Family? Someone they wouldn't connect to you immediately? Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. Friends? He had business associates, golf partners, people who attended his fundraisers. But someone he trusted with his life? Someone who wouldn't immediately alert his security team or worse. Leak to the press? The silence stretched between them, and Zoe's eyes opened, reading the truth in his face. You're alone too, she whispered. Just like me. The words hit harder than any punch. Marcus Caldwell, featured on magazine covers, surrounded by hundreds of employees, invited to every gala in Chicago, was utterly, completely alone. I have a lake house, he said finally. 2 hours north. Nobody knows about it except my attorney. I bought it under an LLC, completely private. We could. They'll check property records, Zoe interrupted. Rich people always think paper trails are invisible, but they're not. Not to people who know how to look. Marcus stared at this 8-year-old child who understood the criminal underworld better than he understood his own isolation. How do you know all this? Zoe's face clouded. She slid down the wall, sitting on the cold metal walkway, hugging her knees. For the first time since they'd fled, she looked her age. Small, scared, and impossibly tired. Mama was smart, she said softly. After she agreed to testify, they put us in witness protection. But it didn't work. The crew found us anyway twice. After the second time, Mama stopped trusting the system. She taught me everything she knew about staying hidden. Fake names, cash only, never sleep in the same place twice. Her voice cracked. She said if anything happened to her, I had to remember. Trust no one, keep moving, and never let them see you cry. Marcus lowered himself beside her, his expensive suit now torn and filthy. That's no way for a child to live. It's the only way I'm still alive. Zoe wiped her eyes roughly. Mama did her best. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed, housekeeping, night shifts at a convenience store, weekend catering. She was always so tired, but she never complained. Said we were building a better future. She sounds like an incredible woman. She was. Zoe's voice hardened with grief. She thought testifying would make things better. The prosecutors promised protection, promised justice. They promised we'd be safe. She looked up at Marcus, tears cutting tracks through the grime on her face. They lied. And now she's gone. And nobody cares except the people trying to kill me for what I saw. Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest. The same hollow ache he'd felt standing at his wife's grave, surrounded by hundreds of people who'd offered condolences but disappeared within weeks. He'd retreated into work, into deals and mergers, convincing himself that success was the same as healing. But this child, who'd lost everything, hadn't retreated. She'd survived. I care, he said quietly. I know I'm a stranger. I know I'm some rich guy who stumbled into your nightmare. But I'm here, Zoe. And I'm not leaving. She studied him with those two old eyes, weighing his words. Why? You could have driven past that alley. You could have called 911 and left. Why risk everything for someone like me? Marcus thought about the question, really thought about it. Why had he stopped? Why had he stepped into that alley when every instinct screamed danger? 3 years ago, my wife Sarah died of cancer, he heard himself say. She was sick for 8 months, and I spent that time in boardrooms, convincing myself that building the company was how I'd save us. That if I made enough money, I could buy the best treatment, the best doctors. He laughed bitterly. She died while I was in Tokyo closing a deal. I wasn't there to hold her hand. I wasn't there to say goodbye. Zoe's expression softened. Since then, I've been running too. Not from criminals, but from guilt. From the fact that I had everything, money, power, connections, and it meant nothing when it mattered most. He looked at her directly. When I heard your voice in that alley tonight, it was like Sarah was giving me one more chance. One chance to actually be there for someone who needed me. Zoe was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. I'm sorry about your wife, she whispered. I'm sorry about your mama. They sat in silence, two people from completely different worlds, bonded by loss and desperation. Above them, the building hummed with life. Security guards changing shifts, cleaning crews working through the night, the machinery of commerce grinding endlessly forward. Down here, in the forgotten spaces, they were just two survivors trying to make it to morning. Zoe's head drooped against Marcus's shoulder, exhaustion finally claiming her. He could feel her trembling, the adrenaline crash hitting her small body hard. We should move, she mumbled. Not safe to stay. 5 more minutes, Marcus said gently. Rest first. Then we'll figure out where to go. Nowhere's safe, she whispered, already half asleep. Mama said the world isn't made for people like us. It's made for people like you. The accusation stung because it was true. The world was made for Marcus Caldwell. He'd never questioned it, never examined his privilege, never wondered what happened to the people who fell through the cracks. Now he was in the cracks with them. A sound echoed through the tunnel, distant voices, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. They'd found the access point. Zoe jerked awake instantly, all drowsiness vanishing. We move now. Marcus nodded, helping her to her feet. She swayed, touching her temple, and he saw fresh blood seeping through the bandage. Which way? He asked. Zoe scanned the tunnel, eyes calculating distances and angles. There's always 2 exits in these systems. Fire code. The main access is where they're coming from, so... She pointed deeper into the tunnel. We go toward the service elevator shaft. Should connect to the parking garage. Should. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Guess we'll find out. They ran together into the deeper darkness, the voices behind them growing louder. Marcus realized with startling clarity that in the space of a few hours, his entire world had inverted. He wasn't the one protecting Zoe. She was teaching him how to survive in a world he'd never known existed. And somewhere in that realization, Marcus Caldwell began to understand what his wife had tried to tell him in those final months. That the measure of a man wasn't what he built or owned. It was who he stood beside when everything else burned away. The service elevator shaft loomed before them, a vertical tunnel of darkness broken only by emergency lights every few floors. Zoe pressed her ear against the metal door, listening. Her breathing had grown shallow, labored. The bandage on her temple was now completely saturated, blood dripping down her neck. "Clear," she whispered, though Marcus could hear the tremor in her voice. They slipped through, finding themselves in the parking garage's lowest level, P4, reserved for executives. Marcus's Mercedes sat exactly where he'd abandoned it hours ago, though it felt like a lifetime. The keys were still in his pocket. "We take your car. They'll track us in minutes," Zoe said, reading his thoughts. "GPS, traffic cameras, toll booths. Might as well send them a map." Marcus scanned the garage. 40 vehicles, all expensive, all likely equipped with modern security systems. Then what? Zoe's eyes fixed on a maintenance van parked near the electrical room. Faded blue paint, dented bumper. The kind of vehicle that blended into city backgrounds. That one. Nobody tracks work vans. "You want me to steal it? You got a better idea?" She swayed, catching herself against a concrete pillar. "Because I'm getting real dizzy, and those men are maybe 2 minutes behind us." Marcus had never stolen anything in his life. He'd built his empire on contracts and handshakes, on playing by rules that favored people exactly like him. But those rules had evaporated the moment he'd picked up Zoe in that alley. He approached the van, glancing around for security cameras. 3 visible, 2 likely hidden. By morning, his face would be plastered across every screen in Chicago. The merger would collapse. His board would demand answers. His reputation, built over 2 decades, would crumble. None of it mattered. He smashed the driver's window with his elbow, ignoring the alarm's wail. Inside, he fumbled under the steering column, his fingers clumsy and uncertain. Hot wiring cars was something he'd seen in movies, not a skill taught at Harvard Business School. "Move," Zoe said, pushing past him. Her small hands worked with surprising confidence, stripping wires and touching contacts. The engine coughed to life. Marcus stared at her. "How do you?" "Mama's boyfriend before the crew killed him. He taught me things." She climbed into the passenger seat, her face gray with pain. "Drive. Now." The parking garage exit spiraled upward. Marcus gunned the engine, tires squealing against concrete. Behind them, the stairwell door burst open, men pouring through. Gunshots cracked, sparking off metal. Marcus's hands gripped the wheel so hard his knuckles went white. He'd driven racetracks for charity events, but never with bullets chasing him, never with a dying child in the seat beside him. They exploded onto the street, rain still hammering the windshield. Marcus turned hard, the van fishtailing. More gunshots. The side mirror exploded. "East," Zoe shouted. "Toward the industrial district. More places to hide." Marcus obeyed, weaving through empty streets. In his rearview mirror, 2 SUVs emerged from the garage, headlights cutting through the rain like predator eyes. Zoe fumbled with the glove compartment, finding a crumpled map of Chicago. Her hands shook as she traced routes, blood from her temple dripping onto the paper. "There," she said, pointing. "Old meatpacking district. Been abandoned for years. Mama and I hid there once." Marcus pushed the van harder, but it was old, struggling. The SUVs gained, their engines roaring. One pulled alongside, window rolling down. Marcus saw the gun before he consciously registered it. "Down!" he screamed, yanking the wheel. The van slammed into the SUV, metal shrieking. Gunfire shattered the rear window. Marcus felt something hot graze his shoulder, and suddenly his shirt was wet with blood. Zoe screamed his name. "I'm fine," he lied, fighting to keep the van steady. Ahead, the industrial district materialized. Warehouses and abandoned factories rising like tombstones against the night sky. He took a corner too fast. The van tilted, 2 wheels lifting off the ground. For a sickening moment, Marcus thought they'd flip. Then gravity slammed them back down, the impact jarring his wounded shoulder. Behind them, 1 SUV had fallen back, but the other stayed close, determined. "There!" Zoe pointed at a gap between 2 warehouses, barely wide enough for the van. Marcus didn't hesitate. He aimed for it, praying. The van scraped through, sparks flying as metal kissed brick on both sides. The SUV tried to follow but was too wide. The sound of crunching metal echoed as it wedged itself between the buildings. Marcus kept driving, plunging deeper into the industrial maze. Finally, he cut the engine behind a collapsed loading dock, darkness swallowing them whole. Silence descended, broken only by their ragged breathing and the rain drumming against the van's roof. "You're bleeding?" Zoe whispered, staring at his shoulder. "So are you." Marcus pulled off his ruined shirt, tearing it into strips. His shoulder burned, but the bullet had only grazed him. He wrapped the wound quickly, then turned to Zoe. She'd slumped against the door, her eyes glassy. Blood had soaked through her bandage again, running down her face in dark rivulets. Her breathing came in short, desperate gasps. "Zoe, stay with me." "Tired," she mumbled. "So tired, Mama." Panic seized Marcus. He'd seen enough medical dramas to know the signs: confusion, pale skin, rapid breathing. She was going into shock, possibly worse. The head injury was more serious than he'd thought. "Zoe, listen to me. You have to stay awake. Can you do that?" Her eyes focused on him, but barely. "Did we lose them?" "For now." Marcus cradled her face gently. "But I need you to tell me what to do. Where can we go? Who can help us?" Zoe's lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, so quietly he almost missed it. "Dr. Chan. Mercy Street Clinic. Chinatown. Is she safe? Mama's friend. Treated us off the books when we couldn't afford real hospitals." Zoe's eyes rolled back. "But Marcus, she might not. I don't know if. It's our only shot." Marcus climbed back into the driver's seat, his shoulder screaming in protest. The van's engine struggled but caught. "Stay with me, Zoe. Just a little longer." As he pulled back onto deserted streets, Marcus realized the terrible mathematics of their situation. Chinatown was on the other side of the city, at least 40 minutes in good traffic, longer in a dying van with every cop and criminal looking for them. Zoe had maybe 30. The rain intensified, turning streets into rivers. Marcus drove like a man possessed, running red lights, taking corners that made the van groan. Every few seconds he glanced at Zoe, making sure her chest still rose and fell. "Talk to me," he said desperately. "Tell me about your mama. What was her name?" "Grace," Zoe whispered, her voice distant. "Grace Morrison. She used to sing to me every night before bed, even when she was exhausted from work." "What did she sing?" "Everything. Gospel, old soul songs. Sometimes she'd make up silly ones about our day." A faint smile crossed Zoe's face. "She said music was the only thing they couldn't take from us. No matter how bad things got, we always had songs." Marcus's vision blurred with tears. This woman, this Grace Morrison who'd worked 3 jobs and testified against murderers and taught her daughter how to survive, deserved better than a bullet. Her daughter deserved better than bleeding out in a stolen van. "Sing one for me," Marcus said softly. "One of her songs." Zoe's eyes fluttered. "Can't. Too tired. Please, help me stay focused. Help me get us there." For a moment, silence. Then, barely audible, Zoe began to hum. The melody was simple, achingly beautiful. Words emerged, cracked and faint. "When the world is dark and cold, when you're scared and feeling old, remember Mama's here with you. In every song and morning dew." Her voice broke. "Mama made that one up the night before she testified." Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. "It's beautiful. She was beautiful." Zoe's breathing grew more labored. "Marcus? I'm really scared." "I know, sweetheart. Me too. If I don't make it, don't say that." "If I don't," she continued, each word an effort, "promise me something. Anything. Tell them about Mama. Tell them she was brave. Tell them she mattered." Marcus could barely see the road through his tears. "You're going to tell them yourself. You're going to survive this, and you're going to make sure everyone remembers Grace Morrison." Zoe didn't answer. Her head lolled against the window, and Marcus's heart stopped. "Zoe, still here?" she breathed. "Just resting my eyes?" "No, stay awake. Look at me." But her eyes had closed. Marcus screamed her name, begging, pleading, making promises to a god he'd stopped believing in years ago. The rain hammered harder, as if the sky itself was weeping. Ahead, the neon signs of Chinatown emerged through the downpour. Marcus searched frantically for Mercy Street, the van lurching through narrow roads. There, a small storefront clinic, dark except for a dim light in the back. Marcus slammed on the brakes, the van skidding to a stop. He gathered Zoe in his arms, her body terrifyingly light and still. Blood soaked his already ruined suit as he kicked the clinic door. "Help! Somebody help us!" The door opened, revealing a small Asian woman in her 60s, glasses perched on her nose. She took one look at Zoe and her face went pale. "Inside, now!" As Marcus carried Zoe into the tiny clinic, laying her on an examination table under harsh fluorescent lights, Dr. Chen's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking pupils, pulse, breathing. "What happened?" she demanded, already cutting away the blood-soaked bandage. "Head injury. 5, maybe 6 hours ago. She's lost a lot of blood. She mentioned you knew her mother, Grace Morrison." Dr. Chen's hands stilled for a fraction of a second. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with grief and rage. "Grace is dead." Marcus nodded. "And the West Side crew is hunting her daughter." It wasn't a question. Dr. Chen turned back to Zoe, her jaw set. "I'll do everything I can. But you need to understand, this child needs a real hospital. CAT scan, possible surgery, blood transfusions. I have supplies here, but they have people at the hospitals. They'll kill her the moment she arrives." Dr. Chen was silent for a long moment, her hands never stopping their work. "Then we do this the hard way. But Mr. Caldwell, you know who I am? I know your face from the news, and I know that by bringing her here, you've painted a target on my clinic too." She met his eyes, unflinching. "I'm still going to help. Grace saved my nephew from gang violence years ago. I owe her everything." She turned back to Zoe, beginning to set up in 4-line. "But you need to decide something. Right now, you're a billionaire who can still walk away. Call the best lawyers, claim you were coerced, go back to your empire. The world will forgive you. It always forgives men like you." Marcus looked at Zoe's still form, her small chest barely rising. He thought about Sarah, about all the moments he'd chosen wrong, about the empire he'd built that meant nothing when held against a child's life. "I'm not walking away." Dr. Chen nodded slowly. "Then you need to prepare yourself, because they're coming. And when they do, money won't save any of us. Only courage will." As she worked to stabilize Zoe, Marcus sank into a plastic chair, his own wound throbbing. Through the clinic's small window, he watched the rain-slicked streets, waiting for headlights that would mean the end. For the first time in his carefully constructed life, Marcus Caldwell had no plan, no strategy, no way out. Only a promise to an 8-year-old girl who'd already lost everything, and the terrifying certainty that keeping it might cost him everything too. Dr. Chen worked in focused silence, her hands steady despite the tremor Marcus could see in her jaw. The 4 drip fed slowly into Zoe's arm, fluids replacing what she'd lost. The gash on her temple required 12 stitches, each one placed with meticulous care. Marcus watched from the corner, his own shoulder wound bandaged but throbbing. He'd refused anything stronger than ibuprofen. He needed to stay alert. "Her vitals are stabilizing," Dr. Chan said after what felt like hours. "But she's not out of danger. The concussion is moderate to severe. She needs rest, monitoring, and honestly, she needs a neurologist. How long before she wakes up? Could be an hour. Could be 6. Dr. Chun pulled off her gloves, disposing of them in a medical waste bin. "Mr. Caldwell, I need to be direct with you. Even if she survives this, the trauma, physical and psychological, will follow her for life. This child has been through hell." Marcus's throat tightened. "I know. Do you?" Dr. Chen's voice sharpened. Because I treated Grace and Zoe for 2 years while they were running. I watched that little girl learn to sleep with one eye open. I watched her mama work herself sick trying to give her daughter a chance at normal. And I watched the system fail them over and over again. She moved to the sink, scrubbing her hands with aggressive precision. The prosecutors who promised protection, they cut funding for the safe house. The marshals assigned to them rotated every 3 months. Never enough continuity. Grace begged for help, and they gave her paperwork. Marcus absorbed the words like punches. I didn't know. Nobody does. People like you write checks to feel good, then go back to your towers. You never see the faces of the people your charity supposedly helps. Dr. Chun dried her hands, her expression softening slightly. But you're here now. That counts for something. A sound outside froze them both. A car engine, slowing near the clinic. Marcus moved to the window, peering through the blinds. A black sedan idled across the street, windows tinted. His pulse spiked. Kill the lights, he whispered. Dr. Chun flipped the switch, plunging them into darkness. Only the glow from Zoe's monitor remained, casting eerie blue light across her pale face. They waited. The sedan's engine rumbled. Minutes stretched like hours. Then it rolled forward, disappearing around the corner. Marcus released a breath he hadn't known he was holding. They're searching block by block, Dr. Chun said quietly. It's only a matter of time before they come back. Marcus's mind raced. They couldn't stay here, but Zoe couldn't be moved safely. They were trapped. Unless, Dr. Chun, does this clinic have a basement? Storage space. Why? Because we're going to disappear. Marcus turned to face her. And we're going to make them think we left the city entirely. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in the clinic's cramped basement, surrounded by boxes of medical supplies and old furniture. He'd sent a text from his phone, deliberately, carefully worded, to his assistant. Emergency situation. Taking a private jet to New York. Handle the board meeting without me. We'll explain later. Then he smashed the phone and tossed it in a dumpster 3 blocks away. Let them track that. Let them think he'd fled. Dr. Chun had been skeptical, but she'd helped. She'd also made a call to someone she trusted, her nephew Tommy, who worked in Chinatown's tight-knit community network. Within the hour, Tommy had arrived with supplies. Bottled water, non-perishable food, blankets, and most importantly, information. Word on the street is the West Side crew put out 50 grand for information on you too, Tommy said, a wiry man in his 30s with sharp eyes. They're hitting every hospital, clinic, and shelter in the city. But they're also spreading thin. Most of their guys are concentrated downtown near your office building. What about here? Marcus asked. Chinatown's been hostile territory for them since they tried to muscle in on the gambling dens last year. Local gangs pushed back hard. They'll send people, but carefully. They know they're not welcome. It wasn't much of an advantage, but it was something. Tommy looked at Zoe, still unconscious on the examination table above them. That's Grace's daughter? Dr. Chun nodded. His expression hardened. Grace was a good person. She helped my little sister get out when an abusive boyfriend wouldn't let go. Testified as a witness for her restraining order. He looked at Marcus. You keep that kid safe, understand? Whatever you need. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of yet another debt he could never repay with money. After Tommy left, Dr. Chun moved Zoe carefully to a cot in the basement, setting up a portable monitor. I'll stay here with her tonight. You should rest too. But Marcus couldn't rest. His mind churned with strategies and scenarios. For years, he'd solved problems by throwing resources at them, hiring the best people, buying the best solutions. Now, trapped in a basement with nothing but borrowed time, he had to think differently. He had to think like Zoe. What would she do? She'd survived for 2 days on the streets with killers hunting her. Not through money or power, but through cunning and knowledge of the spaces between things. Marcus pulled out a pen and paper, sketching a rough map of Chicago from memory. He marked their location, the territories Tommy had mentioned, the places the crew would expect them to go. Then he started marking the places they wouldn't. What are you doing? Dr. Chun asked, bringing him a bottle of water. Planning. Marcus circled an area on the south side. The crew thinks I'm running because that's what rich people do when things get dangerous. They think I'll use my resources. My plane, my properties, my connections. Won't you? No. Because that's predictable. And predictable gets Zoe killed. He tapped the map. But there's a place here, a property I owned through a shell company. A failed development project from 10 years ago. Half-built condos that never got finished. The project went bankrupt, got tied up in legal battles, and I eventually walked away. The holding company dissolved. The paperwork's a nightmare. And the place has been sitting empty ever since. Dr. Chun studied the map. And you think they won't find it? Not immediately. It's not under my name, not under any name they'd connect to me. And it's in territory they don't control. Marcus looked at Zoe's sleeping form. It's not perfect, but it gives us time to figure out our next move. And what is your next move, Mr. Caldwell? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I don't know yet, but I know we can't keep running forever. Eventually, we have to go on offense. Against the West Side crew, they're organized crime with connections throughout the city. You're one man. I'm one man with 42 years of experience fighting corporate wars. Marcus's voice hardened. I've destroyed competitors, exposed fraud, and dismantled hostile takeovers. I know how to find weaknesses and exploit them. This isn't a boardroom. No, it's survival. And I'm a very fast learner. A soft moan interrupted them. Zoe stirred on the cot, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, she looked confused, disoriented. Then her gaze found Marcus, and relief flooded her face. You're still here, she whispered. Marcus knelt beside the cot, taking her hand gently. I told you, I'm not leaving. Tears welled in her eyes. I dreamed Mama was singing to me, but when I woke up, her voice broke. She's really gone, isn't she? Yes. Marcus didn't soften the truth. She deserved honesty. She's gone, Zoe. And I'm so sorry. Zoe's small body shook with sobs. Marcus gathered her carefully, mindful of the 4 and stitches, and held her while she cried. Dr. Chun turned away, wiping her own eyes. After a long while, Zoe's tears subsided. She pulled back, wiping her face roughly. How long was I out? About 3 hours. They're still looking for us? Yes. Zoe nodded, her expression settling into that frightening maturity again. Then we can't stay here. Dr. Chun could get hurt. We have a plan, Marcus said. There's a place we can go. Show me. Marcus spread out the map. Zoe studied it with the same calculating focus she'd shown in the maintenance tunnel, her finger tracing routes and distances. This development here, she said, pointing. How many buildings? For towers. About 30 stories each, but only the first 15 floors are finished. Exits. Multiple. Construction sites always have emergency routes. Fire stairs, service elevators, even external scaffolding in some places. A ghost of a smile crossed Zoe's face. You're learning. I have a good teacher. She looked up at him, and for a moment, Marcus saw hope flicker in her eyes. Not the naive hope of a child, but something harder, more resilient. The hope of a survivor who'd learned that giving up meant death. Okay, she said. We go to your building. But Marcus. Yeah? When they find us, and they will find us, we need to be ready to fight back. Not run. Fight. Marcus thought about her mother, about Grace Morrison who'd stood up to testify despite the danger, about a woman who'd taught her daughter songs and survival in equal measure. Then we'll fight, he promised. Together. Dr. Chun approached with a bag of supplies, bandages, antibiotics, pain medication. Take this, and take this too. She pressed a cell phone into Marcus's hand. Burner. Untraceable. My number's programmed in. If you need anything, call. Thank you, Marcus said. For everything. Thank Grace. She's the one who taught me that some things matter more than safety. Dr. Chun looked at Zoe. Your mama was a warrior child. She'd be proud of you. Zoe's eyes welled again, but she blinked the tears back. I'm trying to be brave like her. You already are. An hour later, Marcus and Zoe slipped out the clinic's back entrance into the pre-dawn darkness. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets slick and gleaming under dying streetlights. Tommy had provided an old delivery truck, nondescript and forgettable. Marcus helped Zoe into the passenger seat. Noting how she winced despite trying to hide eyes, they drove through empty Chinatown streets, heading toward the abandoned development on the south side. Marcus realized something profound had shifted between them. He'd entered that alley as a man used to being in control, used to having answers. He was leaving this basement as someone different. Someone who'd learned that true strength wasn't about having power over others. It was about standing beside someone when they had none. Zoe dozed against the window as they drove, her hand clutching the stuffed bear Dr. Chan had given her from the clinic's donation box. In the growing light of dawn, she looked impossibly young and impossibly old at the same time. Marcus glanced at the map on the dashboard, then at the rearview mirror, checking for tails. No one followed. Not yet. But they would come. And when they did, Marcus Caldwell would be ready. Not as a billionaire. As a man who'd finally found something worth more than his empire. The abandoned development rose against the morning sky like a graveyard of ambition. For skeletal towers, their upper floors exposed to the elements, their lower levels sealed with rusted chain link and fading construction warnings. Marcus cut the engine 2 blocks away, approaching on foot with Zoe leaning heavily against him. Southeast corner, she whispered, her eyes scanning the perimeter with practiced precision despite her exhaustion. Less visible from the street. They slipped through a gap in the fencing that Marcus had never noticed, and would never have found without her guidance. Inside, the ground floor was a maze of concrete pillars and exposed rebar, construction equipment abandoned mid-project like artifacts from a lost civilization. Marcus had poured $8 million into this development before the market crashed. Now it was worth nothing except as a sanctuary. They climbed the stairs slowly, Zoe pausing every few floors to catch her breath. By the time they reached the 12th floor, her face had gone gray again. This one, Marcus said, guiding her into a partially finished unit. Drywall covered most of the interior walls, and though the windows were just openings to the sky, the floor was solid. More importantly, it had 3 different exits, the main stairs, a service corridor, and an external fire escape. Zoe collapsed onto a tarp-covered stack of materials, her breathing labored. Marcus unpacked Dr. Chen's supplies, checking her stitches. The wound looked clean, but her pupils were still slightly uneven. You need rest, he said firmly. We need a plan. Zoe's voice was weak but determined. They'll find this place eventually. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. When they do, we'll be ready. Marcus pulled out his phone. Not the burner, but one of 3 others he'd had Tommy acquire. Each loaded with specific contacts, specific purposes. But first, we gather information. Over the next hour, as Zoe drifted in and out of sleep, Marcus made calls. Not to his usual network of executives and lawyers, but to people he'd once dismissed as beneath his notice. Tommy's contacts in Chinatown, a private investigator who owed him a favor from a corporate case years ago, even a journalist who'd been investigating gang activity on the South Side. Each call painted a clearer picture of the West Side crew, their structure, their territories, their weaknesses, and most importantly, their leader, a man named Vincent Reeves who ran the operation from a nightclub downtown. A man who'd killed at least a dozen witnesses over the past 5 years. A man who would never stop hunting Zoe as long as she posed a threat. Marcus ended his final call and looked at the notes he'd compiled. Years of business strategy crystallized into a simple truth. You couldn't win by defending forever. Eventually, you had to attack the source. What did you learn? Zoe had woken, watching him from the makeshift bed. Marcus sat beside her, showing her the notes. Vincent Reeves. He's the one who ordered your mother's death. And he's the one who'll keep sending people after you. I know who he is. Zoe's voice was flat, dead. I saw him, the night Mama died. He was there. He's the one who gave the order while I hid in the closet. Marcus felt cold fury settle in his chest. Then we have to remove him from the equation. How? He's surrounded by guards. He has cops, judges, half the South Side in his pocket. Zoe's eyes met his. Even if we could get to him, what then? Are you going to kill him? You're not a killer, Marcus. No. But I don't have to be. Marcus pulled out his phone again, showing her photos the investigator had sent. Reeves has been careful. He never gets his hands dirty directly. But he's not careful enough. He's been laundering money through legitimate businesses, restaurants, car dealerships, even a youth center. So what? Everyone knows he's dirty. Nobody cares. They will if we give them proof they can't ignore. Marcus opened another file, financial records, shipping manifests, paper trails that connected directly to Reeves. I've spent 20 years learning how to destroy competitors through information. I know how to build a case that's airtight, undeniable. Zoe studied the documents, her sharp mind processing quickly. You're talking about evidence. Real evidence. Not the kind that disappears when witnesses die. Exactly. Documents that are already filed with federal agencies, copies sent to multiple journalists, everything uploaded to servers he can't touch. Marcus's voice hardened. We make him so radioactive that his own organization turns on him. Because the one thing crime bosses hate more than witnesses is attention that threatens their entire operation. That's smart. Zoe's expression showed grudging respect. But it takes time. And time is something we don't have. As if summoning the devil, Marcus's burner phone buzzed. A text from Tommy. They know about the development. Coming your way. Maybe an hour. Marcus showed Zoe the message. Her face went pale, but her jaw set with determination. Then we don't have time to run the legal play, she said quietly. We have to face them. Here. Now. Zoe, you're injured. You can barely stand. I'm alive. That's enough. She pushed herself upright, wincing. And I'm done running. Mama ran for 2 years and they still killed her. I won't die running too. Marcus saw the steel in her eyes. The same steel her mother must have had when she chose to testify. The same steel that had kept this child alive when everything and everyone had failed her. Okay, he said quietly. Then we fight. But we fight smart. They spent the next 30 minutes preparing. Marcus wasn't a soldier, but he understood strategy. He understood leverage and positioning. And this building, his failed investment, knew every corner of it. They barricaded the main stairs with debris, creating choke points. They loosened boards on the other stairwell, creating traps. They set up the external fire escape as their final exit, testing the old metal to make sure it would hold. Zoe moved with purpose despite her injury, her survival instincts guiding their preparations. She positioned mirrors scavenged from the units to create sight lines around corners. She marked escape routes with small tears in the tarps, invisible to anyone who didn't know to look, clear as day to them. You've done this before, Marcus said, watching her work. Mama taught me. She said if you're going to stand and fight, you need to control the battlefield. Zoe's voice cracked slightly. She learned that from her grandfather. He was in Vietnam. Said the jungle wasn't the enemy. Not knowing the jungle was. Marcus absorbed the lesson. This building was their jungle now. When they finished, they positioned themselves on the 12th floor, high enough to see attackers coming, low enough to escape if needed. Marcus found a length of metal pipe, weighing it in his hands. It wasn't much, but it was something. Zoe held a heavy wrench, her small hands white-knuckled around the handle. They waited. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows through the empty window frames. Marcus checked his phone repeatedly. The information packets he'd compiled were set to autosend if he didn't input a code every 12 hours. Insurance. Mutually assured destruction. If Reeves killed them, he'd destroy himself in the process. But would that be enough to stop him? Would a man who'd murdered witnesses care about exposure if it meant eliminating the last threat to his freedom? Marcus didn't know, and that uncertainty gnawed at him. Marcus. Zoe's voice was soft. Yeah? If something happens to me, if I don't make it, don't talk like that. Listen. Her tone was fierce. If I don't make it, you keep fighting. You make sure they remember Mama. Make sure they know her name was Grace Morrison, and she was brave and beautiful and she mattered. Marcus knelt beside her, taking her small hand in his. You're going to tell them yourself, Zoe. You're going to survive this, and you're going to grow up, and you're going to make sure the whole world knows who your mother was. Promise. Promise. But you have to promise me something too. What? That no matter what happens, you don't give up. You keep fighting. You survive. Zoe nodded, tears streaming down her face. I promise. They sat together in the ruins of Marcus's failed dream. Two people from different worlds bound by trauma and determination. Then Zoe stiffened. You hear that? Marcus listened. Vehicle engines. Multiple. Growing closer. He moved to the window, peering down. 3 black SUVs pulled into the development's lot, doors opening. Men emerged, 6, 8, 10 of them, armed. And leading them was a man in an expensive suit, his silver hair slicked back. Vincent Reeves. He'd come personally. Which meant he wanted to be sure. Marcus's blood ran cold. But his mind went clear. He pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. What are you doing? Zoe whispered. Changing the terms. Marcus hit send. I just released everything, the documents, the evidence, all of it. Every news outlet in Chicago, every federal agency. It's out there now. He can't stop it. Zoe's eyes widened. Then we just have to survive long enough for it to matter. Exactly. Below, Reeves was organizing his men, pointing at different entrances. They were coordinating, professional. Marcus gripped his pipe tighter. Beside him, Zoe stood ready, a child soldier who never should have had to be one. The sound of boots echoed through the empty tower. Multiple teams, closing in from different directions. Marcus looked at Zoe one last time. Whatever happens. I know, she said. Together. Together. The first man appeared at the stairwell, gun drawn. Marcus swung the pipe with everything he had. The fight for their lives had begun.